Welcome back, everybody, to the 60th episode of the My Generation podcast. Thank you so much for all tuning in for the past few weeks of podcast content. We're once again sort of continuing our trend into the creative industries. We've spoken to so many great people over the last few weeks, from actors and musicians, and we're continuing that theme. We're talking to a visual designer, videographer, artist and editor. It's Ollie Paterson, based in Ashford, who we're speaking to today. Ollie's a graduate from the University of Kent. He did film studies there, and we're going to take a deeper dive into his visual work. Welcome to the show, Ollie.
Hello, how are you doing? Thanks for having me. Big
Very
60,
well, thank you.
Nice.
Yeah, we made it to 60 episodes,
Fantastic.
Which is crazy. We're over a year through the podcast. And just to tease a few more things coming to the show, because in the last 60 episodes, the show has grown considerably. And on the show, we're going to be featuring Sammy Bacon, who does a quick-fire album recommendation. So every week, you've got brand new music to be listening to from Sammy. Great stuff. Always hear from him every single Thursday. And then Harry Munday will be doing a film review. He brings a film review every single week to the show. It's only his second week doing this now, but he's a running feature of the show, and every Thursday he's joining us permanently. We've also got two local Kent musicians on this week's edition. We've got Gareth Bland and Off Topic, and you'll be hearing two of their songs throughout the show. We've got Gareth Bland's Touch the Sky and Off Topic's Olivia. Both of those songs are coming later on in the show, so do keep on listening. But as Ollie's phone goes off in the background, we're going to move.
We're going to mute that bad boy right there.
Oh, the first rule of podcasts.
Oh, no.
We're going to move into Ollie. Where did your sort of love for visual artistry, videography work? Where did all that begin for you?
That is a big question, man. Do you know what? I don't think I can actually pinpoint a specific time. I've always been interested in drawing as long as I can remember, really. I started off kind of... I remember me and my cousin, when we were kids, I don't know if we were like 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, but I think the earliest memory of drawing and of creating something would have been when we... it would be like a horror comic book, basically, about... We'd make up these like crazy creatures and stuff like that, and then I'd draw the comics out, and then it would be these monsters killing these people that we didn't like in school. And yeah, so that was I guess that's a good look into what I'm sort of still interested in now. I'd say that I'm sort of geared towards like dark comedy. I think is how I work, really. That's my
dark comedy, yeah. But more specifically within comics as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've always been interested in comic books as well, yeah.
And there's probably quite a close link between film and comics then for you, because it's just two very similar ways of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think that, I think comic books get a bad rap, and I think in recent years, the comic book format, has really grown, and it's gotten some genuinely good accolades, like some independent comics have really gained traction, and like Mouse, for example, by Art Spiegelman, and I think it's slowly turning into a more respected art form by the mainstream, which I think is really positive, because it's completely an art form, and you can tell some really incredible stories.
Do you sort of specialise in more minimalist artwork? Could you paint a picture of what is your actual style of drawing?
Yeah, so I guess I've kind of gone through lots of different phases. I think when I first started, I was doing more comic-y stuff. Like I used to watch a lot of Adventure Time. I still do, to be fair. But I used to be really obsessed with cartoons and like SpongeBob. And when I was a kid, it was like Power Rangers and stuff like that. So I've always been interested in like bright colours, splashy kind of effect. But I'd say the drawing style I've kind of honed it to now is kind of more freeform. So it's kind of like a scribbly, sketchy kind of style, but trying to look at the subject or think about an idea as fully as I can, and then try and just sketch it in a kind of half abstract, half sensical kind of way. It's strange, but yeah, that's kind of how I work at the moment, really.
When you're doing these drawings, are these for like commission projects, or are they just hobbies, more narrative stuff? What sort of field are you usually drawing with then?
The more commission stuff I get is more videography, to be honest. Drawing for me has always been a very personal kind of pursuit. Since I think around the end of like sixth form, I started just carrying around sketchbooks everywhere I went, and I've got like 30 plus of these sketchbooks now, just the little ones that you get in art shops and stuff like that. And I've just just been trying to constantly progress. I think the way to progress as an artist is obviously, and in anything in life, it's just practice. Just do it, even if it's just a little bit every day. But yeah, so I've just been carrying around these sketchbooks for a long time now, and it's interesting to see how I've sort of developed, over the years, and from each sketchbook, it's nice to look back at, past ones and think, oh, that was a period of time where, because I date them all as well, and think about.
Interesting. Yeah, well, yeah, it places it in a point in history, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's different to taking a picture of something, because that is a very indexical relationship. That's a very literal interpretation, and obviously that's a great thing too. But I think documenting things through art, drawing especially, or painting or whatever, it's not just limited to sketching and drawing, but I think it's also quite indicative of your headspace at that time as well. So yeah, that's why I like it, I think.
I think that's so true what you say about headspace, because I find when I'm taking photos, I'll edit them, do post-production in a way that really does become very clear as to how I'm feeling in that time.
Yeah.
And I think we're living in an interesting time, obviously, as of the time of recording this. The reason we're doing this podcast kind of via, over the internet waves is because it's the 26th of March and we're in the middle of the coronavirus isolation. So currently, producing work is in a very interesting time. So whenever you're listening to this, I hope you're safe and well, but it will be a very different world you're listening to this in. But I know that, throughout this, the way I've been making things has been different. And obviously we've done a little bit of work, visual art and design, keeping cards close to my chest with what that is, but that'll all be coming up in the future. Relating
Exciting.
to, you've done... some artwork for it, and I wanted to talk about inspirations because I'm not a massive comic book reader, but I don't know if you've heard the comic Sabrina.
Yeah.
And I thoroughly enjoyed that, and that sort of blends, it makes comics a little bit more mainstream, doesn't it? I was wondering if there were any comics that specifically inspired your actual drawing style. I mean,
on the subject of Sabrina, I love that, love the artist, and so his name is Nick Dranasso. It's D-N. I don't know how to pronounce it, but he's Canadian, I think, and he's a really, really amazing comic book artist. Like he did his first book was called Beverly, and similar to Sabrina, well, Beverly was more of like a bunch of vignettes about this one town. They were sort of interconnected stories, but I think the amazing thing about Drasno is that he just makes it so oddly. I mean, his art and the storytelling at the same time is just so conversational and at times mundane, but it's just the way that he really lets it breathe. It kind of feels really cinematic, I feel, and that's something I really haven't seen in many comics before. I mean, yeah, and he he's won a lot of awards with Sabrina and Beverly, actually.
That's why I heard about it. I heard about it like winning book awards, but it not really being a book, and it doesn't feel like a comic book. It feels that cinematic because it's kind of like real life, isn't it, in comic book form, which is really odd.
Yeah, and I think I just really love it when any medium, any art piece. So, for example, this, sort of blends mediums because it is half literature, half comic book. I feel, and obviously it's got cinematic elements to it, and I think a lot of things that I'm interested in really tend to blur the lines as well, and that's what I try and do in a lot of my work as well.
And in what ways have you been blurring the lines then in your specific work?
So I also do like spoken word poetry, and it was for Screen South actually that I submitted a film. So me and Max met at a development day for Screen South, and unfortunately I didn't get to interview stage for the film, but the film had a spoken word poem underneath it, and that was the kind of thing that was that was the narrative, I suppose, and the visuals were sort of an accompaniment to that. And so I've been doing like sort of spoken word and stuff like that. And I think I kind of try and I read quite a lot, and I take a lot of inspiration from sort of modern classic literature as well, and sort of trying to take influence from a lot of rappers and poets, spoken word poets, and sort of literature people, like figures in literature, and then kind of try and mix soundscape in there as well. That's kind of a lot of stuff like that I kind of like to do. So it's difficult to define that. I guess it's kind of music, kind of spoken word, kind of poetry. It's difficult to define, but
yeah, it's interesting. It does draw the lines on many of them. So, and it's interesting you've got such a strong influence of literature. And would you say that you're looking at that from sort of the way the words flow into each other, or the beats? What are you sort of looking at English literature for?
I just love the stories, man. I just love getting absorbed in a book. Recently read The Haunting of Hill House, which is Shelley Jackson. And that was just it's a really good classic like haunted house story, basically. And I think for me, literature is I just love the way you can really get into the head of a character. I think it's one of the, because you're telling it so much from their perspective. I think literature is one of the main ways you can really see through a person's view of things.
Yeah, and have you ever sort of considered them blending that with, or has it ever blended with your comics? Have you done a mix of spoken word comics and literature, or do you feel like they're all quite similar anyway?
That's an interesting idea, man. Yeah, I think you've started something there. New projects, throwing everything else out of the bin. Yeah, no, that's a cool idea. No, I haven't.
We've got Ollie. I can see Ollie on the Skype thinking away. He's in deep thought. He's going to have plenty of ideas coming sort of out of his head as that'll be coming to a screen near you or something, maybe in a bookshop. Yeah.
Indeed.
So in fact, is there any way anyone can actually find your artwork if they wanted to contact you?
So it's mostly I'm working on a website at the moment. I'm trying to build up more of a portfolio before I actually release anything in that sense. Like on a website, I mean. But on my Instagram page, there's a lot of artwork.
And all of that will be linked in the description of this podcast episode. So if you're listening, if you're listening on YouTube, SoundCloud, or Spotify, that we're in 3 places already. Hopefully, going to be on Apple soon. Please go to the description. You'll find all of Ollie's links to see his artwork, because I know you're sort of doodling them in your sort of free time all the time anyway, so there's always new art to see over there. I noticed that you've also got some blends with like photography as well, where you've got pictures but then drawings on the pictures. Could you talk about what inspires that?
Which ones are you talking about in particular, actually?
Which ones am I talking about? We're everyone on the podcast together is all getting up Ollie's Instagram right now.
Including Ollie.
Yeah, including Ollie, who can't even remember his own posts.
Yeah, I know. Just done so much.
Even the most recent one, March 11th.
Yeah.
You might have to scroll back a bit if you're listening to this in the future.
No, so this was for the Screen South film, actually. So it was a mixture of live action and animation, and the idea centered around food and anxiety and sort of food disorders, and it was just kind of following this character in daily life, but yeah, it was told in a really kind of like surreal way. I didn't develop the film to as much as I'd have wanted to, but I think I'm still gonna work with that concept in particular, even though I didn't end up making that into a film, which I still could at some point. I would like to do more of that stuff. So a mixture between digital art and photography, because I think that was quite a striking image.
Yeah, and really do you often, because I'm already getting a vibe that there are certain topics you like to talk about quite considerably. Are there any sort of reasons or specific topics that often make it into your work? Because I know, even though we're in an interesting time with isolation at the minute, I know that sci-fi and isolation are 2 things I constantly touch on with my writing, accidentally all the time. Are there subconscious things that always make it into your work?
Yeah. So I've always been. And it's not something I realised actually until I was actually making a film with me and my friend made a few films together, and I just kept on coming up with this idea of masks. Like, I'm just obsessed with masks. Like, I just can't get enough of masks, and I don't know what it is. I think, and doing a bit of like Freudian analysis on myself or whatever, I think it's just like the obstruction of identity and being able to I think a lot of it's about this facade that a lot of people have in daily life. You're not always I think humans are multiple different people. And I think the person that we are in front of our parents, and the person that we are in front of our friends and our partners, and then even just to ourselves, I think they're all different people. And I think for me, Mask in particular is just a really interesting graphic, visual way to sort of show that and conceal that at the same time.
And obviously the mask would say a lot about the character, because if they've constructed it, if they've stolen that mask.
Exactly.
I mean, even with just the little bits of stuff we've been discussing for our project, you made a character with a mask.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't. It's inescapable.
And, I mean, so that's always going to make it your work. And I imagine there's masks everywhere. I mean, I'm a massive Star Wars fan, so I'm just going to be instantly thinking about the hundreds of masks in there and all the historical influences they've had, haven't they? So are there specific masks that you've sort of been inspired by that you've seen throughout history? Because I know that even for those sort of Star Wars-y kind of masks, they've had inspirations from, the past.
Yeah, I think, so there's one film I made. It was a student film, and there was this photographer called Lee Miller. She was a photographer, I believe, in the Second World War. Her and Man Ray, who was another really famous photographer, had I think they were in a relationship. I can't remember. But yeah, they did some really stark war pictures. And there was this one particular picture that really inspired me, which is just an image of two people in a trench, I believe, and this woman looking around, or in a war setting. I can't remember. Don't think it was in a trench, but it was in a war setting. And she's looking around, and she's just got this crazy mask on, and yeah, that's something about it that just really struck me. So Lee Miller and Man Ray.
Yeah, well, I'm sure everyone will be checking that out, and try and find a picture of that ourselves as well. Yeah, masks making it into all your work. When you said that, I thought, you've made one picture for me, and it's got a mask
already.
So fitting.
Yeah.
And I imagine many more to come. So now we're going to move into some of the other cool features we got on the show today, and we'll go back to Ollie in just a moment. We've got the trinity of Sammy Bacon, Harry Munday, and the music feature. Starting off with Sammy. Every single week, Sammy comes onto the My Generation podcast and brings you a quick fire album review. And here is the album that Sammy recommends this week.
Hi guys, Sammy Bacon here to give you another album recommendation. This week, I'm going to be recommending Ezra Furman's Perpetual Motion People. Ezra Furman is a indie rock singer-songwriter from America, and Perpetual Motion People is the perfect starter album to what is one of my favourite artists. I first heard about Ezra Furman when I was 18. For my 18th birthday, my friend Lloyd bought me the CD, Perpetual Motion People, and I fell in love with it. It's an album that talks about gender and identity and queerness and masculinity and femininity, and it is, as I've said already, it is a fantastic starter album into one of the most interesting singer-songwriters of our generation. Ezra Furman brings this really interesting kind of collide of rockabilly, indie rock, singer-songwriter, jazz rock, and doo-wop, kind of. It has amazing tracks on it, such as Haunted Head, Lousy Connection, and Restless Year. While I don't think it's as good as some of his other things, such as Transangelic Exodus or Day of the Dog, I think if you want to get into Ezra Furman, this is where you start. If you like this, you should like his other stuff. Ezra Furman, Perpetual Motion People, give it a listen. Hope you like it. See you next time.
And thank you for that, Sammy. We'll tune in once again with Sammy next week to find out what his next album review is. Please do let us know in the comments below if you're listening on YouTube what you think of some of the albums that Sammy has recommended. He's been doing this for so long now. He's been doing this all the way since the podcast was in March. Every single week he's been bringing album reviews to you. Really excited to share more of what he's got as well. Next, our newest feature onto the weekly section of the show is Harry Munday. He brings a film review every single Thursday to the show, and here is the film that Harry recommends this week.
This week's film recommendation from dear old Harry is the unsprung film Silver Linings Playbook. Now, this movie did garnish a bit of praise at the Oscars, but when this came out, I didn't hear a word of it till years later, while I was forced to watch this as part of my film studies in college. And I honestly missed out on one of the most heartbreaking, most emotional stories I've ever seen. The movie follows Bradley Cooper's character and Jennifer Lawrence's character, that follows them through both of them dealing with severe mental health issues. Like, Bradley's character has got extreme bipolar. See Jennifer Lawrence's character deal with the turmoil of a false marriage, and it's just so heartwarming to just see these two characters come together and find sort of fixes for each other in each other's broken pieces. It's just so beautiful, and I will happily say this is one of the very few movies I've shed a tear at, and it deserved all the Oscars it got. And is going back to Bradley Cooper's character, the utter just pleasure of seeing mental health shown in just such a raw, true way is mad. Like, this is one of the movies where it best shows what bipolar is like to a person. Shows how it affects family, shows how it affects everyone, shows what it does to a person's past, to their future. And it's just so mind-boggling just to see that acted out so perfectly by every character in this. And I recommend you go see that straight away.
And thank you so much for that, Harry. Really excited to have him every single week on the My Generation podcast. We'll tune in with Harry once again next week to find out what his next film review is. Now we're going to our music feature. This week we have two musical features. We've got Gareth Bland and Off Topic. Off Topic we're actually going to be having on the My Generation podcast very soon to talk about their music creating process, but for now we're going to be playing Gareth Bland first. Gareth Bland is a 38-year-old musician, but didn't start playing the guitar until he was 35. Music's always been a massive part of his life, playing drums through his teenage years, and in his mid-30s had some time on his hands, so finally learnt the guitar, picking up a few basic chords and starting with this song, Touch the Sky. A lot of his influences being the Beatles, the Jams, Oasis and the Stone Roses, to name a few. And here on the My Generation podcast, here's Gareth Bland, Touch the Sky.
As I wake up in the morning, as soon as I open my eyes, the rest of the world is still yawning. I just wanna learn to fly. How high will we fly? How high will we fly? And soon and soon it'll be just you and I, forever, forever. As soon as we wake up in the morning, as we open our eyes, the rest of the world is so boring. We just wanna fly so high. And soon we will touch the sky. And soon
And that was Gareth Bland with Touch the Sky here on the My Generation podcast. Really great to feature his music. Please keep on listening as you'll hit off topic later on in this week's show. Now moving back to Ollie to continue our discussion about his visual artistry process. So we've talked about, comic books and how they've influenced you, English literature. I wanted to move more over to the videography side of your life. Where did that first start? Where did you start, moving away from just being, doing drawings, and now you're working with cameras and visuals? When did that begin?
I think my main inspiration initially for filmmaking was, and this is a really basic answer, and I'm sure this is the case for a lot of other filmmakers, British filmmakers especially, but it was Edgar Wright.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It's just I think the auteur, if you're a creative person and you're sort of inclined towards wanting to make stuff, I think the auteur is a very kind of seductive idea, because it's like, I can control so many aspects of this, and you sort of make up this blueprint of who you are as a filmmaker. And I think that just really interested me in particular, because he has so many, he's got a very niche style.
And he's got a lot of dark comedy in his stuff as well, but his is also kind of light too. He's a very funny director. Yeah,
exactly. Even from Spaced, and also just mad in love with Simon Pegg as well. He's just hilarious.
What is your favourite Edgar Wright film? Because I know that this is always a contentious one.
Well, I think that World's End got a bad rap, to be fair. I thought it was better than... I think a lot of people expected it to be like the first two of the Cornetto trilogy. But I honestly, genuinely thought it was still a really good film, really well made. Controversial, I didn't love Baby Driver. I'm not going to lie.
You'll be looking back on this interview in like 20 years when you know Edgar Wright and you and him are best buddies. You'll be like, what did you say about Baby Driver?
But favourite, I think probably Shaun of the Dead, because it was the first one I saw. It's just it's a perfect film, I think, really.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, my favourite is actually The World's End. So when you started talking about it at first, I was like, I was hoping for a second, but it's
nice.
Yeah,
nice. No, I respect that.
But Baby Driver's good in its own ways. But it's you either love it or you really don't like the concept, and it's it's one or the other. But it's interesting. So he was your main directing inspiration, sort of growing up, then?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And that's led into what you make now. So what kind of direction is your videography work taking you in at the minute?
So I'm doing like freelance bits and bobs, here and there, try and pay the bills and whatnot. But I think I'm just trying to apply for a lot of, opportunities and like competitions and stuff like that. I think you've just got to be relentless in this field, You've just got to be applying for stuff all the time, always looking on websites to see what's new, and what sort of thing you can apply for. And yeah, I've got a few projects sort of that I'd like to do and that I've sort of half developed and stuff like that. And then just trying to find a way to make those ideas kind of applicable to, the context of a competition or, a funding body or something like that.
Yeah, and I can tell with sort of how you've spoken about like the sort of theory and philosophy behind certain filmmakers and your own ideas, that there's clearly a strong theoretical influence. When you were doing film at university, were you did you like having the balance of theory and practical? Because I'm a person who's basically all practical and zero theory, but I know that everyone's different.
Yeah, man. No. I think there's a lot to be said for just going out there and doing it, to be honest. Like, there are so many filmmakers, that just did it and just learned on the job and just made loads and loads of stuff, made loads and loads of mistakes, never went to film school, and I think there are so many really, really accomplished filmmakers that have done that and have done it really, really well. And I think that in anything in life, just mulling it over too much and learning too much. There's only so much you can learn from textbooks, and there's, if you're doing it on the job, then you're learning a lot. But yeah, I think I'm a bit of a nerd, really, so I do like to back up. I did really enjoy the balance of theory and practice.
Yeah, nice, because I know that film theory is really fascinating, and it's definitely informed some of my ideas for it. I'm one of those people that likes to go out and do. But has there ever sort of been, you know, a bit of theory that once you learned it, you were like, oh, I need to apply that to everything I make?
Ooh, that's difficult. I'm digging right back to first and second year now. I think it was a lot of David Wardwell. I mean, that's just like a really basic, you know, like obvious. The film art, I think, was the first book that we were given to read in our first module at uni, which everyone had to do. But I think a lot of what he says he just breaks down everything, you know, in terms of cinema. And I think when I came here in first year, I had a very specific idea of sort of what I wanted to do and what I thought film was, and then that was all sort of chucked out the window. And then I think going to uni and learning about this sort of stuff really put it in a whole new light that it's film art. You know, film is an art form. It's not just, there's so much more to it than just, I don't know, what I'd initially perceived it to be.
And when you came into university, was there like a specific role that you thought you were going to be doing? And then once you got to the end of your 3 years, you were like, I'm in a different place now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember the first appointment we had with our academic advisor, Lawrence Jackson, who was just like, we just all had to go around the table and introduce ourselves and say, you know, what we were sort of interested in and what we wanted to get out of uni. And 90% of the class, including myself, said, I want to be a director, you know, obviously. And then he's there, you know, the man's worked in the industry, and every single year I'm sure that he's had people, you know, fresh-faced kids going, I want to be a director, I want to be a director. And yeah, so I guess that was a bit of an eye roll for him. But I think I still want to be a director, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the
after
same
all said
boat.
and done, to be honest, like I'm very much a control freak over the stuff I make, and you know, I'm a bit greedy. You know, I want to help out on other people's projects, and I think that there is a lot to be said for filmmaking because it's so collaborative, you know, and I love helping out and on other people's ideas, and you know, helping them realize their ideas. And I think I've over the period of uni, I've kind of learned to value that a lot.
Yeah, that's a really great balance. I mean, we spoke to Dory last week because I met her through making a student film, our second year and end of semester film. And we actually got quite lucky. Literally 2 days after we wrapped, the university shut down for isolation, so we got very lucky. But making that film, our directing process is really interesting. Me and my friend Lewis, we co-directed it. But my passion for directing comes from working with actors. I love the relationship between a director and an actor. Lewis doesn't. He likes the feel. He likes what it's going to look like. Where would you say you sit with that, with your sort of directing style?
I describe myself as a Labrador. So like, me as a person, I'll go to a place and I'll just be a Labrador in a big park with a load of other dogs. Like I'm just like, you know, sniffing the grass, sniffing other people's. Yeah, let's not go there. But yeah, just like, you know,
this is
just
a family show.
Everyone and, you know, just going in and talking to everyone and just being, you know, just building relationships with people. Yeah, I do very much enjoy the relationships with actors. Yeah, and having that almost, because I'm quite interested in acting as well, and I think almost, I don't know if it's a thing, but like method directing, you know, like trying to really get into the same headspace as that person and maybe even, you know, bounce ideas off. I'm quite all over the place as a person as well, so finding, you know, I like to be doing lots of different things at once, so working with one actor at one time and then doing this and switching to that and doing that and then doing that and doing that, I really enjoy that. But then at the same time I do really think about the final image as well, so I think I'm maybe somewhere sort of in the middle.
Yeah,
you know?
happy middle of those two. Yeah, I think I couldn't agree with you more. It's nice to be able to balance and shift off loads of different projects. I think the bit I enjoy working with actors the most is something we learned from our lecturer Tony Smith, where he talked about, you know, getting the actor to try and reach the answer for themselves, where like you just throw a load of questions at them about the script and then let it mull over. So when they're performing it, they've got all these sort of ideas stirring around. There's something a lot to be said for that, but it's, you know, it's interesting. You're actually trying to get into the actual same headspace. How would you say you do that? I
mean, one glaring example I think would be, so I made for my third year module film, we made a film about a goblin who wanted to become an actor, and he was living in a world where goblins were kind of, allegorically they were in the place of like underrepresented minorities, you know, and it was kind of like an allegory for xenophobia and racism. But it was this goblin that wanted to become an actor, and he was trying to traverse the acting world, and yeah, so to try and get the physicality for this goblin down, because obviously, you know, there was a lot to be done for the performer, and luckily we had a really talented goblin, the main actor. He was really good, and he did a lot of like physical theatre and stuff like that. And I met him at an alternative cabaret night, which was just like an end of module performance. But me and him would get like very. We went into a big space, into a big hall, and we would just be doing a lot of kind of talking and bouncing off each other, and then just like crawling on the floor, and just, you know, I just go up and run up to him and just like sniff him and just, do loads of weird stuff, and we just try and work out this strange kind of movement and this methodology to how to approach the character. So yeah, I'm quite hands-on in that sense.
That's really interesting. I like what you say about physical stuff, because I'm actually getting quite interested in the idea of dance for film, and not only the actors dancing but the camera person too, trying to dance around them. But it's interesting because you're sort of making the goblin, like at that point you're giving them specific movements that take it away from them being a human, right?
Yeah, and obviously a lot was it was definitely like a very much a two-way street. It was a lot of his ideas as well. But yeah, I think with creating, that's another thing I think I'm interested in is high concept stuff and very character based stuff at the core of a film. You know, very stylized acting or dialogue or, you know, something like that.
Yeah, a hyper stylized is great. It's always the hardest thing to get right, but when you do, I mean, do you know the director Yorgos Lanthimos, who did The Lobster?
Oh yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah. That's quite stylized.
Yeah, man, I love that film so much.
Yeah, listeners, that's my. I mean, I know Harry brings a film recommendation every week, but please check out The Lobster. That is stylized to the extreme. Would you say? Because I know when it comes to hyper stylizedness, there tends to be a lot of inspiration. Because I know for me, Darren Aronofsky, major influence on me. A lot of my writing style comes from his work. Is there maybe it's even Edgar Wright? Is there a specific standout for more, you know, alternative writings that you can think of that's inspired you?
I tend to think that a lot of my writing is influenced by not just filmmakers but people from other mediums as well. So people like Nick Drasno, whatever it is, I can't pronounce the second name. Who wrote Sabrina? People like Kate Tempest. She's a spoken word poet, kind of half rapper. And who else? Basquiat, Jean-Michel Basquiat. His way of painting has really inspired me. I think it's just people that have like a really clear story to tell, and they do it in their very own way, and that do it really effectively. So I think those sorts of people, a lot of musicians as well, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say musicians are quite a key one for me. That I mean, I always put an album on when I write. Is there something you do like that where you've got a specific artist for a specific mood or something?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to music literally 24/7, so it's difficult to pin down exactly. Mike Skinner from the Streets is an incredible storyteller. He's one of my mains. Like I said, Kate Tempest. There's quite a few. I mean, a lot of it is rap, but there is also quite a lot of other stuff as well. JPEG Mafia is someone I'm really into at the moment. I don't know if you've heard his stuff. He does like experimental hip hop.
No, I have not. Really, I haven't heard of that, so I have to check that out.
He's really pushing the form of like storytelling and music, and pushing things in a really interesting direction.
Yeah, it's nice when there's always a really clear blend of music and storytelling. But when I write, I tend to put on like an album that's like either soundtrack or an album where you can kind of put it on and it all feels like one experience. Are there any sort of soundtracks that you listen to as well, or is it usually just rap artists?
No. So it's difficult, obviously, because when you're a writer and you're listening to music that you know the words to, it's quite distracting, and I still find myself having to put on a lot of instrumental stuff because I'm just getting too into the music, and I'm sort of, because it pumps me up, but then at the same time it's kind of distracting me. So I'm half in the script, and then I'm half listening to the music, and then, I'm really enjoying the Uncut Gems soundtrack.
Oh yeah, listen to that one.
It is fantastic. And American Beauty soundtrack is always a good one for me.
Yeah, the Ballad of Howie Bling. What a tune that is. Yeah,
exactly.
I think that sometimes those soundtracks get under. You know, they deserve more praise. The Uncut Gems was an amazing film in general, but that soundtrack was really. It was also really weirdly constructed, wasn't it? They did it very differently with the musical layering. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Safdies are great.
Yeah, I mean, they were good with Good Time as well. I really enjoyed Good Time.
Oh yeah.
But they were actually quite similar movies, though, if you think about it, with plot and visual style. But they offer enough unique stuff. I mean, I'm not going to spoil Uncut Gems, but the stuff that's happening towards the end is just, it's all hitting you in one go. It's like a anxiety fest, but in the best way.
Oh,
right?
Dude, I barely breathed that whole film. It's nuts.
Yeah, and it keeps you just so on your toes, and there's something about that style that I wish I was able to emulate, but like I don't think I could ever do. But there's I think in terms of like visual actual style, it's really interesting because we're mentioning the Safdie brothers now, who have like a really punched in look. All their films are shot on like 100mm lenses. You just get the face, you get no background, it's just character. Backgrounds are all washed out. But then you get a director like Terrence Malick, who is everything shot on like a wide 16mm lens, and you can see the whole world. You get, it's a little bit of fisheye as well, and everything's in focus. Where would you say you fall for most of your narrative work? Are you somewhere in the middle of those, or is there something drawing more towards you?
I think it really depends on the film and the scene. I think a lot of filmmakers, young filmmakers, do get sort of wrapped up in the whole trying to be an auteur and trying to find this very specific niche style that they're trying to bring a very and bringing in a unique voice to a film is fantastic, and that's definitely what you should strive for. But I think a lot of people fail with that because they're trying to apply the same kind of sets of rules they've made for themselves in each film that they make, and that can often be quite limiting. So I think that that's something that I try and steer away from, and try and make every project different visually and narratively, whilst obviously unavoidably being interested in the same things that I'm interested in, masks for example. But yeah, I think it really does depend on the project.
Yeah, no matter what happens, no matter how many changes in genre, there will always be a mask in one of Ollie's projects.
Oh yeah, always.
And you'll look back on this in 20 years when every film you've made has like got awards, and you'll be like, yeah, there's like a mask in the background at the very least or something.
Mask the musical.
Oh. This is coming out. This episode's coming out in July. I mean, you've got time to make that a thing. That's all I'm saying.
That's true. That's true.
So
time is on our side.
Yeah, check out Ollie's social media, and I'm sure he's got something crazy up his sleeve. We're going to be going back to Ollie in just a moment to continue the discussion about visual artistry. But do you actually have anything to say about the subject? If so, get in touch on the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast. Also, leave a comment here on YouTube, or if you're listening on Soundcloud or Spotify. We really want to get your points to Ollie after he's done maybe his Screen South project, or the project with me. Love to bring him back onto the show and deconstruct maybe a specific piece of work.
Yeah, man, 100%.
So do get your questions in if you've got specific questions for Ollie, and we'll bring them to him for next time he is on the show. Moving over to just a few more topics we've got coming up in the next few weeks of podcasts. I'm just going to tease ahead to a few of the guests we've got coming up. We've got Emma Cusson. She's coming on the show to talk about actually two specific movies that she's going to talk about the link between them. She's going to talk about Spike Jonze's 2013 movie Her, and the movie Lost in Translation starring Bill Murray, because apparently, according to her, they have extremely close links, and she's going to be deconstructing both of those movies, and Her is one of my favourite movies of all time, so I'm really looking forward to that deconstructive episode, recording that really soon. Super excited to have that chat. We've also got Connor Jenkins. He's coming back onto the show. When we did the episode about modelling, Connor revealed to us that he is a massive Dungeons & Dragons nerd, and he's going to be coming on the show with with a custom, bespoke written story, and we're going to play a game of Dungeons and Dragons here on the podcast. I've never played it before, so I don't know what's going to happen. This is going to be the first podcast episode where I just kind of hand the reins to the guest and just let them go. And I'm really looking forward to having that discussion with Connor. And we're going to bring guests on. We're going to have multiple people on. It's going to be a big game. And then Sammy Bacon, who you've already heard in the episode, he's our local music enthusiast extraordinaire. Sammy comes on all the time talking about so much music, and we're going to be talking about music through the generations. Really excited to have that chat, and Sammy's going to be talking about different eras of music, the changes, the progression, and going into all that detail. Next, I just wanted to move over to a local impact. Now, I appreciate at the moment this is a difficult situation to talk about in regards to what you can do locally to get involved. But what would you say, Ollie, if someone's interested in video work, maybe away from university angle of it, and they wanted to get involved in videography, visual drawing, where would be the best places that they can go once, society's back to normal, up and running again?
Man, that's a really difficult question. I think, obviously, the creative industry is mad competitive, it's really difficult to stand out and make a name for yourself, especially because of the sheer amount, the market is completely saturated. So I think it's a mixture of doing what you love, so, specifically practicing what it is you're interested in all the time, every day, and just bettering your craft, and also applying for things. It's really difficult to pinpoint exactly where you should be diverting your energy, and I've spent a lot of energy just traipsing the internet for this opportunity, that opportunity, and then sort of finding out it's not right and stuff like that. But I think you've just got to really get yourself into a routine of looking, keeping your eye open for these things, keeping on top of what topics and where, the ideas behind a lot of the artwork is coming from.
Yeah, and I think it's an obvious really interesting discussion is because you went through the university process, you got your degree in film, and then went on from there. If you guys go back to the 56th episode, only a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, you'll have heard from Owen Laws, who actually dropped out of university to start making film. So it's going to be a really interesting discussion here. This is the podcast where, you went through the university experience. And so if you wanted to look at it from an angle where you didn't want to consider university, and honestly, both options are good because it just depends on the person. So I'd recommend thoroughly listening to episode 56 to hear what Owen has to say about that. But what would you say then, if we're going to go for the more positive university angle for this one, would you say some of the biggest benefits you've gained from taking film at university level?
So I think that first of all, I do genuinely agree that some people just don't get on with the curriculum that is posed at university, and that is and often they can be a lot more they can be a lot more steps ahead of people that have been to uni, and have been under these kind of strict rules and deadlines and stuff like that. And I've found a lot of freedom in being out of uni. So I graduated last year, and I found that oftentimes uni can be quite restrictive in it can sort of quell your ideas and put them in a little box, even though you're learning all the time. It's quite freeing to be out of that system. However, I have found uni to be a really great place to meet people. I'm from the place I'm from, there weren't many like-minded people in the sense that were interested in the same sort of things as I was. So meeting people was definitely a big thing. Genuinely being in love with the subject and reading around the subject as well, not just reading the stuff and watching the stuff that was posed in lectures and seminars and things like that.
It's interesting, isn't it? So please, both people listen to both of those episodes. If you're weighing up university as an option, or maybe you've are looking beyond it, what you can do, then these are two very close episodes that offer very similar but also different insight, and I couldn't agree more. University is not for everyone, but can be really great for some people, so it's worth weighing up that. We're going to go back to Ollie in just a moment to wrap up this week's episode of the show. Before we do, we've got Off Topic, that we're going to be playing one of their songs here today on the show. It's the song Olivia. We featured Off Topic a few times on the show before. We haven't featured Olivia yet. And just to give you an idea of who Off Topic are, they are a powerful, energetic and refreshing band. They can be described as, and they're a no-fuss rock band. Formed in 2017, the band were focused on cover songs of rock and blues musicians they have idolised before starting to write their own songs later in that year. And here on the My Generation podcast is their song, Olivia. And that was Olivia by Off Topic here on the My Generation podcast. So excited to bring them on the show and actually talk to them about their music creating process. Stay tuned on all the My Generation podcast social medias. Facebook's the best place to check for updates on new guests. So please go over there at the My Generation podcast to find out when those episodes will be releasing. Now, to wrap up the show, Ollie, we asked this question of every single guest on the show. Final question. And I just wanted to ask what you think you've learned by talking about your visual artistry process here on the podcast.
It's quite interesting to, I guess, kind of speak about your process out loud, because I think it can often, because the way everyone tends to work, is obviously, it's quite insular. I think creating, unless you're doing it in a group, and it's with any medium, it is always quite personal, and I think speaking about it out loud can sort of always help, and sort of concrete things in your mind and sort of give you new ideas, and
Amazing. Well,
It's
thank
also
you.
just been a good chat, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's thoroughly interesting. Always hearing someone's new approach to filmmaking is always fascinating to me. Everyone's got different ideas, so it's really fascinating. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Ollie.
No worries, man. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Well, we're going to have to bring Ollie back on the show to, directly deconstruct some of his work. I think we're going to do the same with Owen when he's got some stuff out and just, directly dig in to that work. I mean, Ollie, I'm hoping whatever work we deconstruct, it's got masks in. Otherwise, this whole episode's null and void. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's been a great chat. I just wanted to thank you all for listening on Sundays as well to obviously on Sundays we now do a bi-weekly show. So we've got Sundays, it's just me and you talking, and on a Sunday night I'll do an anecdote or a film review, and then on a Thursday it's always a guest, music, reviews and recommendations. So a really full Thursday show, and then a bit more of a relaxed, chill, smaller Sunday evening edition. Last Sunday I talked about a topic that's really personal to me. I've got tinnitus, and I talked about what it was like with that experience, and that was for episode number 59, a very, very important episode to me. So thank you for everyone who had a chance to listen to that episode. Really appreciated you all listening. And then this coming Sunday, I hope to speak about the film Parasite, and then on Thursday we'll be chatting with Emma about Her and Lost in Translation. Really cool stuff coming up on the show. Very excited to bring that to you, and loads of cool local Kent artists as well. Film reviews, features and more here on the My Generation podcast. But it's goodbye from Ollie.
Ta-da.
And it's goodbye from me, and I will tune in with you all on Sunday for the next episode of the My Generation podcast.